I would love for this debate to get on the floor of council and have all the councillors vote on it. But unfortunately, there's a Toronto Police Services Board. And I would like to explain how this Police Services Board is made up. You have a chair, and you have civilian appointments through the province and the city. And then you have 2 councillors and a mayor or mayor's designate. There's 7 people on that board. So you have to win to get anything with 4 votes. So I appreciate that my competitors beside me want to do this. They're going to sit on the board. Unfortunately, we've gone down this road at the Police Services Board. And
say something wrong.
That's what a leader's supposed to do, make change.
I just thought the heck thing was over in the last day council last night, but I'm used to it. Well, we have 2 months at this, so we're good. So, do I feel that it should be abolished? I don't sit on the Police Services Board. Michael Thompson's my representative.
Right?
And no, well, if we're going to abolish it, we abolish it for everybody. So if we're going to abolish it for everybody, so why have police go there? Because I tell you something, and maybe you guys might know this. There are bad in every single race and religion. And I'm not going to have our frontline officers...
You're out of time for your question.
That was 30. Okay, that's all right. No, anyways. That's all right. The bottom line is we have to have more justification and a good cause to stop carding everyone. We started it, there's been problems. But I am not going to sit here and say everybody is not going to get carded. I'm sorry, we treat everyone the same, and right now, I don't think everyone's being treated the same.
Madam Chair, we have 30 seconds, right? Right? Now we have this 30-second rebuttal.
No, not everybody are treated the same way. That's what racial profiling is all about. And let me tell you, I have 14 years of experience as a city councillor. That's why I'm running to be your mayor. And I have been on the Police Service Board, and I know that the mayor has the right to sit on the police board. Mr. Ford did not do so for 4 years. You can count on Olivia Chow as your mayor to be on the Police Service Board so that we can stop the racial profiling.
Anybody rebuttaling?
I think the key question here, by the way, you were on the Police Services Board, Olivia, that's correct, but you were forced to resign from the Police Services Board.
Because I dare to stand up for my right. I dare to stand up against the bullying.
Because what you did was you went to police in front of Queen's Park when there was a virtual riot going on there and tried to tell them how to do their job, which is not the role of a politician.
I was asking for the escalation of the violence.
In any event, look.
That's why you were endorsed by the police union. I thought you didn't want to support by the police union. You were endorsed by the police union. They were bullying people, the Southside bullying. The Police Service Board, you were endorsed by in the last election. Even though it's not supposed to.
I just wanted to say that what I said, and I'll repeat it. I think we have to continuously reform and improve something that started off on a very, very bad footing based on the numbers we talked about tonight. Monitor the results, but I don't think it's practical to say that nobody's ever going to be stopped. And nobody of any, but we should not be stopping randomly people in any neighborhood of any skin color who haven't given any reason to police officers to be suspicious of that. And that's the reform we have to keep working at through the police services board. That is where the mayor's right. That's where the decision is made. He did have a representative there. He could easily have told him to be much more of a force for reform on his behalf, or gone and sat there himself.
I would say that the conditions of the diversity in our police department is changing. And we need to continue to push there. We can't count on politicians to fight our fights. We have to ensure that our people are in the right place to make the change on the front lines. We don't have to worry about racial profiling when we have brothers and sisters as police officers. When we take the control back of our own community, when we actually become the law and we police our own communities. Now I want to share something with you. The law says you do not have to be carded. And an officer is going to have to, as mayor, instruct everyone of their rights. And that's the one thing that is failing, that every interaction, you need to be reminded of your rights if you don't know it so far. You do not have to be carded.
Thank you.
Well, for sure, it's important for us to know the rights, but how many people here know your rights and you still,
Yes.
right? You raise your rights, arm behind your back, because you're raising your rights. That means nothing if people are not held accountable. And the key thing again, if you listen clearly to what is being said here, it's you, not we. It should be we in this conversation. Anybody representing this city should recognize that they're representing the we, not you, it's we. So again, if you're already identified as a person not worthy of being included in the conversation, it's just a you and a them thing, consider who you're voting for. A vote for me is a vote for you. A vote for me becomes a voice for you. And the reality is, all this time, nothing has changed within policing. So it's time to do it now. It's time that we work together. It's time to make the changes. And believe you me, we can.
Madam Chair, I'm going to actually completely change the topic here and just ask a little bit about timing, if you don't mind. We're at the end of the second question. I see that there's a number of 10 more questions, and if we have three minutes each, a quick little bit of arithmetic shows that we're
Not 30 seconds more,
11:30. So what I would like to propose is that we limit ourselves to 2 minutes flat for each of the questions left. And we thank everybody for staying with us.
Oh, man.
Thank you. For our next set of questions.
Is that okay, Madam Chair?
Yes, that's fine, thank you. The Scotia Bank Toronto Caribbean Carnival has generated over $4 billion over the past 8 years. However, the Black community has nothing to show for the money that's in the festival generates. Can some of the revenue generated in the Scotia Bank Toronto Caribbean Carnival used to create opportunities in priority neighborhoods? Would the candidates commit to involve stakeholders in the community to review means by which the Black community could benefit more from this festival? And we'll start on. Mr. Ford, we'll start with you.
Nobody loves the Caribbean Carnival more than Florida. I'm not going to start dancing now, but I sort of feel like it. That is an amazing, amazing party. Don't tell me. And it is better, it is safer, things are going a lot smoother, and you're absolutely right. We have to get X number of dollars. What that figure is, I'm not quite sure. But if we can put it back, I want a specific more, you said the black community in general, I'd like to focus more on the black youth and trying to help them, helping them get an education and jobs. That's the most important. What that number will be, I'm not quite sure, but to answer your question, yes.
Well, I actually have been jumping up for over 20 years. You probably have seen me this year, or every year, and I did the entire parade. I didn't just show up. I actually went right all the way down to Liberty Grand and had a grand time. Yes, there are a tremendous amount of economic benefits that are, I still call it Caribana, let's call it the Caribbean Festival, Caribbean Carnival. We need to work with the federal and provincial government to say that, look, the revenue, by and large, goes through the HST and all of that, right? It's not necessarily captured by the City of Toronto. Whether it's the hotel and people buying and shopping, there's a huge amount of revenue being generated by such a successful carnival. So we need to work with the other levels of government and say to them, you need to invest back. And it's not very fair that the federal government that takes the larger proportion of their taxes actually only contribute 60,000 or something of that nature to the carnival. They can do a lot more, and you can count on me as your mayor to negotiate more benefits to the community, whether it's through a foundation, whether it's through awards, but it needs to come back more into the community because it is the festival that was started by a wonderful team, one of my old friend, Charlie Roach, and the whole team that made all of us have such a fantastic time at the carnival.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, the question actually asks a pretty crisp question.
That's right.
And the crisp question is, how can a community benefit from an event in which there's a lot of investment? So let me try to give you an example and some crisp responses back. You take a look at the Pride Festival. What's happened is if you take a look at the community around church and all up and down those streets, the investment goes back. And now let's take a look at the Caribana Festival. Well, why don't we try and have parts of that festival move to other areas? In Melbourne, Jane and Finch. How about PTO in Ward 42? So some of that investment can go back. We can also use it as a way of learning. We can turn that into a hands-on Black History Month or Black Heritage or Caribbean Heritage. You can turn it into a lot of positive events, not only in dollars and cents, but also in community programming. We have a lot to learn from, but there's a lot of advantages that we can take advantage of. So I think it's a great idea, and let's, instead of figuring out our dance steps, figure out how we can use it to benefit the community.
I think there's a couple of
I am absolutely jealous, just so you know. Everybody else can dance.
I think there's a couple of things we have to do, and a couple of them alluded to up here. Olivia made mention, and she's right. I think one of the things we could do, and I think maybe a mayor could take on the challenge, I'll put it that way, of trying to bring together some of the groups that are still a bit divided in terms of the history of the Caribbean Carnival. Because then we can have one united group. And then secondly, I think what we have to do, and I think the mayor again could do this, is go to the private sector sponsors and say, look, would you be willing to think about adding 10% to what you now sponsor? So if they're a $50,000 sponsor, they'd add $5,000 and so on. But you're going to agree that that's going to be put into a special fund, an endowment fund I would call it, or a foundation, somebody mentioned that, with the express purpose of that foundation being to have that money particularly set aside and only set aside to help, say, kids in the Black community. And then I would go to the governments, and this is an idea that Olivia just gave me, talking about the HST, and go to the governments and say, all right, if the private sector has agreed with their 10% and they put up $1 million, then we would expect you and the governments to at least match that out of the money you take in from the hotel rooms and from all the meals that are purchased and so on. So pretty quickly you could end up with an endowment fund of a couple of $1 million per year that would then be available to do this. So I think the answer to the question is yes. And I think it's going to take a practical kind of approach. I think you don't have to heal the divisions. I think it would be great if it was all for one and one for all for one of the most important things that takes place in our city. And then I think it would be to go to the private sector people who do support the Caribbean Carnival extensively and say, would you consider increasing your support by 10%, not just for the general coffers, but for this fund to help young people in communities across the city. And then to go to the governments and say, will you match that? And I think pretty quickly you could come up with quite a substantial sum of money, totally dedicated to helping young black kids in particular with the problems that we know.
Well, this is a very sensitive subject for me. I've spent the last few years volunteering, working with the Caribana Arts Group in Jane and Finch, revitalizing the community, filling it with culture, flags, and colors. You know, the actual, Mr. Soknacki mentioned about visiting Malvern. Well, they returned to Malvern this year, and it was an exciting time. It was an exciting time, and that said to me that, you know what, there may be some potential. But until, like Mr. Tory referred to, till some healing is done, till true respect is paid and tribute to the brand Caribana. I mean, we understand how important branding is. We understand that the work that was put together by the founders and by all those that followed them cannot be equated and deserves to be respected. And if we are going to move forward, and it sounds like whoever's going to be the next mayor is going to make sure that our communities get funded, so we're going to hold you to task if it's not time. But I will say this, if you don't know, those who are truly struggling within the parade, it's not just the trouble in the communities, but it's the actual people who put together the floats, the people who are designing the costumes, the people who are learning the music to play down the road. So if we're going to start targeting places to fund, we need to ensure those who actually make the festival, the carnival happen, are fully funded, so that this labor of love can actually become a profession. And then we can inspire our youth to follow in their direction, to walk into their father's shoes or walk into their mother's shoes and get paid to make floats and teach other people how to make floats. So that's where I believe the solution is turn it into an education program, make sure they find themselves down at Caribana, at Jane and Finch, allow other steel bands to participate in the other festivals and carnivals, and break the ties. Thank you.
The issue about what to do with the money that is raised in Carnival. It has been said that over the last 8 years that $4 billion has been raised as a result of having this event in our city. The reality is the assessment or the calculation is assessed by hotel revenues because they are accountable for when they make money and at what period of the time. So we can base those figures on the hotel revenues. But what we're not basing figures on, so it's even much more than that, because there is no accountability as to where the money goes. So as a result, what we need to do is recognize that the City of Toronto contributes or has organized. I understood there was some controversy as to what happened before. The City of Toronto has somewhat taken over the responsibility and has allowed now the Scotia Bank to be a lead sponsor. So I agree with some of the things that Mr. Tory has said with regards to percentages going directly back into the community. I agree that what we should be doing is holding all those dollars accountable, meaning receipts are issued, things are followed up, and money is put back into the community to serve the community. And when I say community, I'm talking about the whole City of Toronto and financing the issues that are fundamental to our youth, fundamental to employment, fundamental to all of us thriving.
Thank you. We are running behind on time, so So in the interest of these questions are important to our community, we'll have 2 final questions to wrap up and continue the discussion. We appreciate your patience in continuing with us. Our next set of questions center around education. Very hot topic, right? The University of Toronto study identified that 40% dropout rate among Black Canadian students. After almost 20 years of debate and rejection, the Toronto District School Board finally responded to the cries of the African Canadian parents and implemented the Afrocentric primary and high school. What is your position on expanding, maintaining, or reducing Afrocentric schools? To start with, ONNE Renée.
Thank you. Absolutely, I'm for expanding. I'm all about supporting anything that's working for the people. So this initiative has been starting, it's working well. Students are feeling engaged, they're being identified and learning about them. When I was growing up, I grew up in the city of Toronto. I was educated in the city of Toronto. I had the privilege of going to a performing arts school, so my education was a little more diverse. But what I do recognize is, remember asking the history teacher, well, wait a minute, weren't there any Black people in history? I asked those questions. I asked those questions in school, and I asked them in Sunday school every time I saw a portrayal of everybody else but me. So if the system is working, I say expand on it. And I mean that for also the lesbian gay community as well. If it's working for them and allowing people to be educated and getting an education, if people are feeling intimidated or feeling that they're not a part of the process, they're not going to be there. I am excited that you all feel that you can have an opportunity to be a part of the process today, and you've shown up. So picture you as the students who feel that they're being engaged by people who are saying, hey, we want you to be more informed, we want you to participate, and we want you again to thrive. So I'm in support of it.
Dewitt Lee, please.
Thank you. Well, I had the privilege of attending the Afrocentric High School. Not as a student, but well, actually as a volunteer. I'm director of the Harriet Tubman Games, which just celebrated its 24th annual year. And we brought some of the games to the students there during celebration of Black History Month. And I was blown away by the knowledge and the zeal for information and their culture that these young people had and possessed. And I truly believe that it's deserving of its own school. It's growing up to about 200 students now. So it's gaining in popularity. But we need to make sure that it goes beyond the brick and mortars. We need to ensure that we have Afrocentric after-school programs, that we are providing that information and curriculum so it can be taught at home. So if you don't have the opportunity to attend one of these schools, that curriculum is available to you as a parent so that your young people can follow suit and get similar kind of education. Now, there's a very exciting pilot that's taking place in Scarborough at the Winston Churchill, where they actually are adding some of the curriculum and providing in that space there. And the results are astounding. The young people are excited about learning about themselves, and they're seeing how our people are involved in the world scale, the world economy, and have changed and shaped history. And they are getting a sense and purpose that they've never had before. And they're getting grades for learning about themselves. So what we need to do is we need to find more pilot programs. Now listen, the Chinese government is giving the Toronto School Board $100,000 to rent out space in our schools so they can teach Chinese kids. So they can send Chinese teachers to teach Chinese kids. That is stepping up, being a village, and taking care of your own. So what I'm asking my community today is, what are we willing to do? Are we willing to make the investment to make sure that there's space and curriculum available for our young people so they can be equipped with the knowledge of self? We will find out.
I mentioned in my opening remarks that I think a dropout rate of 40% is evidence of a crisis. And that means you find every possible tool you can use to bring that number down and to have targets to try and bring it down. If you don't set a target for yourself to try and bring it down by a certain number of percentage points over some period of time, it's not going to happen. So I'm willing to look at any effective tool to do this. I saw 2 programs, though, that didn't involve a separate school, but rather programs within schools, supported both by charitable organizations and by the school board. One of them was something that was operated by Yorktown. In the West End, I went to visit it. It was called Girl Talk. I was the only man in the room, but they invited me in to see their program. It was for young girls. I will say the majority, but not all of the girls in the room were girls with black or brown skin. But the course I could see when I was there watching it, and they made me participate in some of the exercises. But having said that, was about self-respect. It was about self-esteem. It was about dealing with people. It was about role models. And you could see it was working when you were in the room. I went to another one in Scarborough, the RH King Academy. I don't remember the name of it, but it was delivered by an organization called Regesh. And they had kids that had been in the program last year, and again, the majority of them, to be honest about this, were kids with black or brown skin. And not exclusively though. And you had the kids there that were in the program last year, and the kids that were just starting the program this year. I could have identified the ones that had the program last year from the ones that didn't, because they had developed the self-confidence and the self-esteem and coming to grips with some of their own particular challenges. And so I don't think we should rule out programs like that, and that is why I'm so much a believer in making these decisions based on what works and what is effective to bring down that dropout rate. And I think we've got to measure it and have targets to bring it down and see what the most effective tools are to actually bring it down. But I would not rule out programs like that that are operated both by the school board and by some of these nonprofit organizations.
You know, when I first read the question, I confess I said to myself, well, it's a school board issue, but it's really much, much more. It's an issue in our society. It's something that we need to get together. And I want to take, to play off some of the comments that came from Dewitt. I'm sorry I can't take his passion from it, but I do want to say that, you know, there's a number of ideas that what we as a city can do. So you take a look at, for instance, earlier today I was at Regent Park Television, and what we could do as a city, and I will do as mayor, is you say, if you're developing, for instance, investing in a public realm, such as a large real estate development, well, put something aside that allows the community to take ownership and to build up, because those kids in Regent Park Television, they were kids, you might not have been in class, but they were in school. They were learning jobs, they were moving forward, and they were learning about entrepreneurship and life skills. We can go further. We can take a look at some of the parks programs that I've suggested. If we take ownership of our parks and do community programming, then we're going to be taking ownership of the things that are important for us. We're going to put in place community programming for and by our communities, so that we learn about ourselves, we teach ourselves, and in fact, we develop ourselves. So these are the things that we can do as a city. So it's much more than a school board issue, it's a community issue. And it takes a city to raise all of our children together.
As your new mayor, I will support reducing the dropout rate and make sure that African Canadian students achieve higher academic performance. It can be done. If you expect more, you get more. And often, a lot of the schools don't expect high performance from the students themselves, and that causes the problem, one of the problems. And 2 days ago, I spoke to a young lady who volunteered after school programs, and she had a homework club. And she had kids that are coming to her homework club, and they were hungry. They were saying, I need food, I need food. And she asked them, how long have you not had food? 2 or 3 days. So you can't learn if you're hungry.